Welcome to the operating system class. In our earlier class, we talked about this case study 1 that is totally oriented towards Unix operating system. Then we had a glimpses of the case study 2 that is Windows operating system. So in Windows operating system, we have taken up Windows 7 as a case study. Then we have taken up the fundamental features of what is Windows 7. Thereby, we are in a part of a discussion towards the uh, Windows 7 architecture. So, in continuation to this topic, so we were telling that Windows 7 uh, do strictly follows up the first aspect, that is user mode, followed by kernel mode, then the hardware resources, and above it the user interface. So whatever operating system tells the same architecture, Windows 7 is also following. Now, how are these functionalities worked, etc., that we have to take up? Okay, in kernel mode, as earlier we were telling, it is an operating system. User mode, so user applications, user programs are taking up, and user needs to communicate here. So there, the structure, it is going to be via some system calls, or it is going to be via some interrupts, etc. So that is what the thing, holistic architecture of a traditional OS is going to take place. Now you can see this Windows 7, it is going to support in parallel. It can work with IBM OS 2. It can work with the portable Unix operating system POSIX. So to that, it is going to act as a subsystem here. So that is the user mode. And it is going to support a 16-bit application. It is going to support 32-bit application, and it is going to support disk operating system. That is what we are going to call it as CMD. So command comp prompt. So command comp prompt. So that is what we are going to call it as Microsoft disk operating system, which it is going to take place. Second, it is going to have addressing towards security. So how is security it is going to maintain? Yeah, it is going to maintain one with authentication. So how is this authentication maintains? It is going to have a username followed by the password, and this username and password, it is going to be matched with the existing password. So username some 501 and some your password is 123. So whether this 123 password is true, so we are going to make a compare operation. So if the compare operation is going to be successful, it is going to allow it inside the Windows operating system. So that is where this password, you have your laptop, and when you say you put some password there, so that is what we are emphasizing it. And how is this password stored? It is going to be stored in a database maintained by the operating system. So all of them, they are going to be brought onto this subsystem, that is Windows. Now it is going to work with 32-bit. But Windows 32 or Windows 64 applications, Windows 7 architecture, it is going to support. Now, what is the things in the hardware? Yeah, they are going to be the CPU, they are going to be memory, followed by IO and other buses and cycles, so bus cycles, etc. So all these, they are going to be part of this computer hardware. Then we are going to have this the first component as as the input output manager. We are going to say this input output manager. So input output manager, it is going to deal with some keyboard, mouse, some monitor, so printer, scanner. So all these aspects, now they are going to be had with this device drivers. So all these elements, they are going to have a device drivers. So a new device is there that it has to be installed to the operating system. It needs some driving software. So that is taken care with this driving software. Followed by the temporary storage locations, it is going to have some cache locations and device drives. And if it is going to have some Wi-Fi routers, if it is going to have some Wi-Fi routers, some dongles, etc., then it is going to be supported with this network driver. So this is all regarding the I/O management. And then the most important thing what the Windows 7 is going to treat is it works in an architecture which it is going to taken up with this object layer. It is going to take up with the word called as object layer. So the processing, it is going to support object oriented programming, and every entity or every system call what this Windows operating system is going to take up, all that it is going to be part of this object space. Got it? So everything it processes in form of object oriented programming, and it takes it as a real world entity, and that real world entity it is assuming it as an object. And yes, we talked about the security references by the way, and then we are going to have this process management. We are going to have this process manager, and process manager, yes, we are going to have some CPU scheduling algorithms, and then we are going to have this plug and play manager. So plug and play, you are aware of it. So I have this my mouse. I have this mouse linked to my laptop. So the position where I'm going to link it to this, I'm just plugging it up, and then I'm going to get a service to a mouse, and then I'm going to get a service to my mouse. So that is where we call that one as plug and play architecture. And this plug and play is going to have some USB. It is going to have universal synchronous bus, and it is going to connect up to 128 devices. So you can link up a webcam to a laptop with a USB port. You can link up some a mouse or a keyboard, some drawing board, everything. So all the components what we are going to link up to the CPU, that are the position where we are going to say it is a driver, and to that location we say it is plug and play. So next one we are going to say it is going to have some virtual memory manager. It is going to have some virtual memory manager. So virtual memory we talked at, it is an illusion of the main memory. So virtual memory locations are more than the main memory, but it is going to create a false copy of a secondary storage. Yeah, it is going to create a false copy that people will feel that his program is going to be executed in the primary memory rather than the secondary memory. So nobody knows where this memory allocation is going to take place. That management is known only to the operating system. And then we are going to say we have some local procedure calls. Up to now, we were talking about inter-process communication, and inter-process communication, it is taking up only the remote procedure calls. But it is going to be a native, it is going to be called it as a native architecture, and that native architecture, it is going to be in part of the OS. So it is going to be a local procedure. So in the kernel, the OS is going to stay, and it is going to have a communication layer. It is going to have some communication with hardware. It is going to have some communication with the hardware, and for that it is going to have some abstraction layer. So we do have this graphical device drivers. So we do have this graphical device drivers. So to support some gaming and etc., the graphical device drivers are going to be supported via this architecture. Yeah. Now, what will be the system components of a kernel? What will be the system components of a kernel? Here you can see up a word called as subsystems, and here we can see a word called as executive. So let us go back to this architecture. So the architecture, you can see subsystem. It is going to be part of user mode, and it is managing all the elements. Next, we are going to call here a word as executive, and it is going to be part of this kernel mode. So the distinction you should be able to understand. The foundations for the thing will be happening by executive and followed by a subsystem. So what will be the major responsibilities of the thread scheduling? Yeah, the first word we are going to call it as thread scheduling. So a process, it is going to be called as thread, nor it is going to be called it as job, and it is going to be called it as an active entity. When it is going to be a passive entity, then we are going to call that word as program. then we are going to call that word as program. So active entity, we mean to say it is program, thread, or a job. So thread scheduling, yes, it is going to have an architecture. So parent and child will be done with this fork command. So we have a fork command. Then we have many to many threads, one to one thread, one to many thread, so and many to one thread. So these are the thread scheduling. We will be having this as thread scheduling, and it is going to support multi-threading, and it is going to support multi-threading, which is going to happen with multiple threads. So multiple threads are going to be executed concurrently. Multiple threads are going to be executed parallel, or they are going to be executed in form of concurrently. So that all happening, we are going to call it as thread scheduling. Later on, we are going to have interrupts followed by the exception handling. So we will be having this word called as an interrupt, and we are going to have the word called as exception handling. So what is a interrupt? So it is a abnormal sequence which breaks the normal flow of CPU execution, and we can say it is an external event, and it is going to be a external event. So CPU is executing one job, CPU is executing one job, and meanwhile some other will come and interrupt it. Some other will say, okay, put this job aside, this is a high priority job, okay, go and execute this first. So CPU is executing one thing, right? That is the normal program, and it says, okay, stop that normal program, do this new program which is allotted to you. So the normal program is suspended, and the external event, as it is having some priority, it is executed first, and after that it is going to happen, then it is going to resume it back. After it is resuming, then it is going to take up this interrupt and exception handling. So when we are going to say it is an exception handling, yeah, you are aware of Java exception handling, and in exception handling, you are very much familiar with try, throw, and catch. So you are familiar with these words. So all these we are going to say it is try, throw, catch, etc. So that it is taking up with this exception handling. Then we are going to call it as low level process synchronization. So when we are going to call it as process synchronization, yes, we have critical section, we have critical region, we are going to have this semaphore, then we are going to have mutex exclusion, then we are going to have some critical section problems. That is one producer consumer problem, dining philosophers problem, bounded buffer problem. So all these aspects, they are going to be called it as a critical section problems, and then we have these monitors. So all these aspects, critical section, critical region, semaphores, mutual exclusion, then followed by monitors, followed by critical section problems, that is a producer consumer problem, dining philosophers problem, bounded buffer problem. All these primitives, they are going to be handled via the operating system, and that too it is going to happen at this kernel mode. And then it is going to have some recovery. So we have heard a word called as reliable. So reliability is that if anything goes wrong, it should be in a position to somehow get that service recapitulated, get that service be up again, and then it is coming to force again. So that is going to be taken up. So all of a sudden a network is down, it sees that node get rectified, that node get serviced, and due to that node, no other node in a network is going to be affected. At any point of time, the jobs will not be suffered. At any point of time, the job will not be suffered. So they get out through this normal flow of execution. So if there is any failure happens, yes, it is going to reboot it things and sees that other jobs are not affected by this loss of failure. Yeah. And one more thing, we were telling that kernel, it is going to support the object-oriented program, and this object oriented program, it is going to have some two sets of objects. So what are these two sets of objects? One set of object, it is going to taking up with dispatcher. So dispatcher, it is just, it gets the job and finally it throws the job. Yeah, your job is done. Then that dispatch management, it is going to be applicable either to events, to semaphores, either to the threads, either to the mutual exclusion. So for all these aspects, this dispatcher is going to have its role. The second thing, we are going to have the control objects. Yeah, control objects, we were telling, it can be some asynchronous procedure calls. It is going to be some interrupts, not we will have to again emphasize two words. Interrupts, they are going to be hardware interrupt and they are going to be called it as software interrupts. So software interrupts, they are programmed. They are programmed. So in a language. So they are programmed in a language. For example, you can say some syntax error, some semantic error. So these all we are going to call it as software interrupts. But when coming to this hardware interrupt, it can be a power notification. It can be some it can be some profiles or process objects. So unforeseen, you can say unforeseen elements. So you don't predict um, network system errors. See, now I am having some poor signal, so I will hold for 1 second. Okay, so the signal, it is showing it is low here. So again, this is the best example what I can say here, the hardware interrupt. So yeah, again the signal is okay. So the unforeseen interrupts, what we can't predict while there is a normal flow of execution. So those, they are going to fall in a category called as some hardware interrupts. So those we are going to call them as some control objects. Those we are going to call here as control objects. And later on, kernel, it is going to have some process and threads, and every process is going to allocate some virtual memory address space. It is going to allocate some virtual memory address space, and then you can see these are the units of execution which are scheduled by the dispatcher, and you can see the thread states. Then you can see the thread state, that is ready state, standby state, running state, waiting state, and terminated state. So all these 6 stages, again you can see ready state followed by standby and followed by running state, and then we have this waiting state, and then we are going to have the exit state. So exit state, it is going to be terminated. So this is a cycle here. Okay, this is a cycle here, and there is no cycle from running to exit state. So every thread is going to have some state information, and state information is going to be maintained by a PCB. PCB stands for process control board, and it is going to have thread ID or a process ID. So to identify the uniqueness of a process. Fine, we were talking, there is a dispatcher here. So dispatcher, okay, I can just go back to the screen here. So there are 6 states, right? So from running state to the exit state, there is a dispatch. From running state to the exit state, there is a dispatch. That means the process has been got executed and there is no longer to be still in the running state. It can be moved from the memory. So at that stage, this dispatcher is going to work. This dispatcher is going to work. So, and this dispatcher, how it is going to take up? It is going to assign with some priorities. It is going to assign with some priorities. So when it is going to be real world, yes, it is going to have a priorities between 16 to 31. And if it is going to be a variable class, it is going to be between 0 to 5. So there are priority set scheduling. We have heard about priority scheduling. So in priority scheduling, we have process P1, process P2, and then we are going to have some burst time, some 3 and 4, and then we are going to call it as priority. This is first priority, this is second priority. Then we are going to execute the jobs. So first I have to go with P2, next I have to go with P1. So that is the model where these priorities are going to come into picture. So 0 we are going to call it as high priority, 0 we are going to call it as high priority, 31 we are going to call it as low priority. So priority jobs, they are going to be divided into two classes. So that the classes which are going to have some variables, those they are given with a high priority, and the things which are going to be ranging therefore with these threads, it is of real time, then they are going to have some low priority. And second thing, we have some characteristics of Windows operating system, that to 7. So if the CPU it is spending much of the time in transferring of data, then we are going to call that one as IO bound jobs nor IO bound threads. So in IO bound threads, more IO rather than CPU time, I'm going to have bulk transfer. I don't need a CPU much. I just say move A comma B. So that means from B to the content, A is going to be getting the data. So there is no much logic. Only thing is bulk of data from B is going to be moved to A. So much of the time it is migrating. So much of the time it is concentrating to transfer the input data towards the output data. Logic was very low, but the transferring of data is high. Then that jobs we are going to call here as an IO bound jobs. So in IO bound jobs, we see that IO devices are kept busy. But if I'm going to call it as CPU bound jobs, suppose if I'm going to have some CPU bound jobs. So at this case, much CPU cycles and low consumption of IO. So at that case, we will be saying that it will be having more usage of CPU rather than IO. So then such a type of jobs we are going to call here as CPU bound jobs. That is the distinction you should understand. So scheduling, yeah, we were working on scheduling in the CPU scheduling, and it is going to enter into a ready state or a waiting state. So we have this word called as short-term scheduler, we have long-term scheduler, then we are going to have some medium-term scheduler. So using these schedulers, we have this process states here. So that is ready, that is wait, not thread terminates. So we call it as states here. So these are called as process states. So using this process states, the scheduling is going to be applied. So that can be applied with real time, and it is going to have some particular time limit. When it is going to have a particular time limit, then we are going to call it as a round robin, and it needs to meet some deadlines. So it needs to meet some deadlines. So we call it as meet the deadlines or meet the targets. So we need those words here. So that is what regarding the real-time threads. So this is all for this topic. And after this topic is done, then we are going to have one more topic. So in this topic, we will be taking care of another thing, that is the second part of the Windows case study. So in this second part of Windows case study, we will be having this part 2, that is we talk about some interrupts. So before we dig deep into the interrupts, so the definition of an interrupt, they are external signals nor events, so which breaks the normal CPU execution. So CPU is executing some job, and when an interrupt is going to come, it says that CPU to suspend that process. So how that is going to have? So then it is going to have some priority here. Now what the CPU is going to do? So CPU, it is going to use a swap operation. So it puts the current job in the stack. So we call that word as suspend. We call that word as suspend. That means the instruction pointer and the program counter, they are going to be having the current value and next value. So the IP, the program counter, the base register. So all this, the values inside it, it is going to put it into the stack. Now select the interrupt process. So it is initiating the program counter. So program counter will initiate the interrupts. Program counter is going to initiate the counter. So I am doing some process X. Meanwhile, process Y will come and it is going to have some high priority. What I have to do? I have to suspend this X. So I am going to put it somewhere. That somewhere I am going to call it as swapping. What I should put? My current base register, my current instruction pointer content, and my program counter content. I am putting aside in the stack. Now, interrupt is having high priority. I am taking that interrupt. I am taking up that interrupt. Then I am executing the interrupt. So that is nothing but process the interrupt. Process the interrupt. After the interrupt has been processed, so clear the interrupt. Clear the interrupt. That is, interrupt is done. Next, what we have to do is resume the previous process. Resume the previous process, right? Here you have used a word called as suspend. Now we are going to use a word called as resume here. Got it? So I'm doing my normal program. Meanwhile, interrupt will come. So the normal program I am putting aside. So putting aside English word is called as suspending. I will execute that job which is brought by the interrupt. Interrupt job is done. Now I am free. What I have to do? I have to take the job which I have put suspended mode. Again, I am calling back the suspended, right? What is the English term for calling back the English suspended? Very lengthy word. So simple word we are going to call here as resume. So resume that process what I have suspended and start the normal execution. So this is called as some sequence of interrupt steps. So this entire architecture is going to be taken up with this interrupt levels. So here you can see 0, we are going to call it as a passive entity. Then we are going to call it as asynchronous procedure calls. It is going to have some interrupt priority as 1, followed by it is working with the dispatcher. So we call it as DPC kernel. Then we are going to have interrupt request queue. So we say here it is going to have some hardware priorities, hardware profiles, followed by the profile of a interrupt. Then we are going to have the number of time cycles it is going to consume. Then we are going to have the translation length aside buffer. So TLB. So the TLBC is going to come into picture. We will be discussing again the TLBs, etc. Then if there is an interrupt from a power failure, it is going to be represented with 30. And if there is a interrupt which is going to be raised by a bus error, then we are going to call it as 31. So seeing that the priority is going to be fixed. So we identify trains by the number. So the similar way we identify some bus route by a number. So based on that number, we are going to fix up the priority. If 31 number is displayed, okay, there is a bus error. If 30 error is displayed, okay, there is a power failure. If some 28 error is displayed, then we say there is some clock error. So these are all different types, 0 to 31, that was 32. So those are all availables, and those available types we are going to call it as types of interrupts here. Okay, now where are these interrupts handled? Of course, interrupts are going to be handled in a kernel, that too at the operating system. So in operating system, we are going to have the kernel. So next again, we are going to say trap handling. So earlier we are going to discuss about the hardware. Now we are going to call it as traps. So traps, we assume that they are going to be happen via the software. So these are going to be mostly generated by the softwares, and they cannot be handled, and they cannot be handled by this exception dispatcher. And we are going to say that an interrupt is going to have interrupt service routine, ISR. We will call it as ISR. So in microprocessor, MPMS subject, you will have a unit, separate unit, dedicated unit to discuss about this interrupt dispatcher and interrupt service routine. So we have already talked about this interrupt service routine. So what is interrupt service routine? Yeah, this is the explanation what I have taken up. So interrupt service routine, we get an interrupt. So CPU will suspend the current job which is there, and there it is going to use a stack. In that stack, it is going to have the instruction pointer. It is going to have the starting address of the program, that is the base register. It is going to place at that location. Then it is going to suspend that process. Then it accepts the interrupts. It accepts the interrupts. So yeah, interrupts are going to be accepted. Then it reinitializes its program counter to where the interrupt is going to occur, to which interrupt routine the interrupt has raised. Yes, the interrupt is identified, the interrupt is attempted, interrupt is cleared. So interrupt is cleared, that is interrupt is done. Now no more jobs are there. Now CPU is idle. Now what CPU has to do? It has suspended a job earlier. So whatever job it has suspended, now it has to take back that job. So taking back that job, we are going to call here as a resuming of a job. So earlier job was in stack, okay, it is going to pop up the contents. So earlier it has pushed the contents, so we call there as a push operation. Now it has taken up those interrupts out, so we call here as a pop-up operation, which is from the top of the stack. So these are all sequence of instructions which are going up in the trap, and that it is happened in this ISR, interrupt service routine. So spin lock, we have talked about process synchronization, etc. A process keep on verifying where this where it leaves out to the critical section. So at that case, it is going to be in a state called as a spin lock, and if there are much time consumed for a spin lock, yeah, it goes for a state called as a deadlock state. So that is what we have talked up regarding the process synchronization problem at that. So Windows 7, we just talked about this. Executive, it is going to be part of a kernel mode. Executive, it is going to be part of a kernel mode. And Windows 7, yes, everything it is going to taken up as a object. Object is having some management or a manager to maintain whether it is an interrupts, whether it is a system calls. So it has to be serviced. So for that we say it is services and entities. So service and entities, we are going to call it as system calls. So all the requests to the operating system, they are going to be called as services. So what operating system has to function, that is a process management service, memory management service, IO management service, file management service. So whatever service is there, that service it has to be processed. So we say them as services, nor they are going to be as entities. So generate the object handling and followed by securities. We talked about securities in the architecture, and keep tracks of which processes are using which object. Yeah, so whether they are going to be used with some set of objects over a file, over devices, over memory, nor over process. So it is going to happen with either a process, file, device, memory. So what type of set of object it is, so there it is going to take up. So then if file is going to be an object, so we can say open, file dot open. Similarly, if I'm going to say file dot close, So these all aspects we are going to call here as some methods. These we are going to call here as some classes. So those we are going to namely it as creating a file, opening of a file, closing of a file, deleting of a file, so and providing some security over a file. So those are all listed out here. So those aspects are listed out here. So next we have these constraints regarding the virtual memory layout. So physical memory is there, and then we are going to have virtual memory, and we are going to have it as secondary memory. So physical memory, we call it as random access memory. Physical we can call main memory, nor we can call it as main memory, nor we can call it as physical memory. It is called as random access memory. Secondary memory, we are going to call our C drive, our D drive, E drive, nor our pen drive. So these are all called as secondary memories. Okay, now in between we are going to have a virtual memory. So virtual memory is illusion of physical memory. Virtual memory is illusion of physical memory or false copy of main memory or physical memory or RAM, whatever you call. So that is what we are going to call it as virtual memory layout. So the capacity of RAM, assume it is some 4 GB RAM. Your laptop also says it is 4 GB RAM. What is your laptop hard disk size? So that is, I can say it is some 500 GB. I can say 500 GB. See that, look at this capacity. So RAM, it is going to show it as 4, and hard disk it is going to say it as 500. You can't bring all the 500 into 4, right? I'm having 500 GB of data, but my RAM size is only 4 GB of data. So it is almost 125 times larger. The hard disk is 125 times larger than the RAM. But all the programs what are going to be in the hard disk, those need to be executed, those need to be serviced. So who is going to do all those? So how a layout is going to be given to them, how a false copy has to be created. So for that, we are going to use this concept of virtual memory. So virtual memory is going to come into picture, and it is going to create an illusion that the users is going to execute his jobs in physical memory. But what is actually happening is the virtual memory, it is going to have its copy in secondary memory, because there is a very limited scope in the random access memory. So the other illustrations, what it is going to do, that it is going to do it in a secondary memory where user is unaware of it. So we say as virtual machine here, add this, then we are going to call it as virtualization. And these are all concepts which are going to come into picture, and they are going to create a virtualization, and they create some pages, they create some page table, and we call it as page frames here. So page frames, it is in main memory. Pages, it is in virtual memory. We have a page table, you can call it as page map table, which links the address of page virtual memory to the address to the physical memory. So that conversion mechanism is going to taken up by a page map table, and page map table converts the virtual addresses to the physical addresses. Similarly, physical addresses are going to be converted to a virtual addresses. So this is all for today. Yeah, thank you for joining my OS class. So I'm stopping my recording here.